Hi everyone, and welcome to MIT Enterprise Forum in New York City panel on bootstrapping versus raising capital. We have a great panel tonight. I will take a second to do a quick introduction to the club before we kick it off. We are a nonprofit. We are the largest by alumni account club, MIT club in the world, and we have our focus is supporting tech and entrepreneurship community. We have chapters also around the world, not just this one, and we regularly organize workshops, expert panels, and fireside chats, and we have an annual membership pass for those who are interested in attending multiple events. If you're interested to learn more, you can go to our website, mitefnyc.org. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's panelists. Starting with Emily Hockman. She's the founder and CEO of Wellery, the anti-diet nutrition app, on a mission to make personalized nutrition accessible for all. Through Wellery's user-friendly app, clients match with a Wellery nutrition coach to receive ongoing concierge-level support based on their specific health goals. Wellery has raised 4.5 million seed round, led by Story Ventures, with participation from Harlem Capital, Tinder co-founders Sean Rad and Justin Mateen, Ground Up Ventures, NBA player Wayne Ellington, Hannah Brothman, and others. Emily has been featured in Business Insider, Thrive Global, and Bucknell University 13 under 35, and Forbes 30 under 30. William Glass. Will is the CEO and co-founder of Ostrich and host of the Silicon Alley podcast. His mission is to improve global financial well-being. Prior to starting Ostrich, William worked at an AI market research company in New York City. Additionally, William led sales teams at Gartner Research, where they worked with the leadership teams of tech startups from pre-revenue to 250 million in revenue. In 2014, William was awarded a Fulbright scholarship where he taught English in rural Thailand for 14 months. William is originally from Alabama and graduated from Rollins College and now resides in New York City. William Moore. Will is a serial entrepreneur, speaker, host, life coach, and happiness expert. After going from suicidal in college to exiting his startup in 2019 for a combined of 323 million, he committed to tackling what he sees as the world's #1 problem. Our knowledge is increasing faster than our wisdom, leading to us becoming less happy. His company, More Momentum, gamifies the process of making people happier by reducing the friction to take the actions that will help have the biggest impact on their lives. To do this, he's combining the latest in science and technology with universal principles to help people replace their failure habits with success habits in the 5 main core areas of their life. Will's ultimate mission is to help people build momentum in their lives so they can pay it forward to help the rest of the world do the same. Andres Blank. Andres is the co-founder and CEO of Fetcher. Previously, he was the founder and COO of Pixable, a consumer mobile company with over 5 million users that sold to Singtel for 30 million. Andres started Pixable while he was pursuing his MBA at MIT. Before moving to Boston, Andres started 3 companies in Venezuela. The first one, a site for college students at the age of 18, and the last one, a lumber trader and exporter with over 30 employees and 1 million in revenue at the age of 24. Now, I'd like to start with Emily. Please tell us a little bit about your company. Take a few minutes, explain the business concept, and tell us, why you're here.
Sure. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the very nice and formal introduction. Very simply, what we do at Wellery is match people with nutritionists and registered dietitians. We believe at the core of our health that diets don't work, but experts do. We're a mobile application in the App Store as well as Google Play, and our goal, our mission as a business is to help as many people as possible learn how to eat, what to eat, and why to eat. We connect our customers with the real experts who actually have the qualifications and certifications to get that done. And at the core, if we do our job right, we will help people lose weight, we will help people mitigate or reduce chronic illness symptoms, and we will help people optimize their fitness and health goals, all through the power of food as medicine, and food as fuel. We are a venture-backed business. We've raised $4.5 million to date, as mentioned, and we're gearing up for a really exciting year for 2021.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Will Glass, would you be next, please? Introduce your company.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Ned, for having me. Appreciate it. It's great to be here on the MIT Enterprise Forum for New York City. So yeah, a little bit about Ostrich. We are a mobile application, and our mission is to improve global financial well-being. What we're doing is helping people build strong money habits to actually achieve their financial goals and have a meaningful financial experience without linking to your bank account or providing financial services. So think saving with friends, investing with friends, giving with friends, and achieving goals together. Our app is now available on iOS and Android, and we have bootstrapped up to this point.
Great. All right, thank you, Will. William Moore, please introduce your company and tell us a little bit about your background. You're on mute, Will.
So the company that I grew and sold and exited out of was doorstep delivery. So I think for this context, I'll talk about that mostly, which was essentially back after I graduated from Rollins, I got into real estate and decided that there was a need in the market, and iPhones were just coming out, and it was, hey, how can people get the food that they want and need? I was stuck in an office selling real estate, and it was either pizza or Chinese. So I grabbed a couple buddies and we bootstrapped it, and we did it all ourselves. And we basically started from ground zero. And over the next 9-10 years, we built up a company, and we were in 19 different markets. This was a restaurant delivery service. So as you know them now, Grubhubs, Uber Eats, DoorDashes. Back then it was like, what are you trying to do? And restaurants looked at us like we were crazy because we were coming into their establishments and saying, hey, we want to take your food and send a driver in that you've never met, that we just hired a couple days ago, and deliver it to the customer. And so there was a lot of front-loaded, difficult hurdles and roadblocks to get past. But then once we got over there towards the end of the business, it was nice because then we had the restaurants knocking at our doors and trying to get with us because they realized it was a good business model. And I exited that last year, or 2019 rather. We did combine with another company. We raised money, and we were able to leverage what we had and buy smaller companies and exit.
Very interesting. Okay, Andres, please introduce us to your company and your background.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ned. It's great. It's a great opportunity. So my name is Andres, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fetcher. And the idea behind Fetcher is that the best people usually don't apply to your job post. The best people are usually in other companies open to new opportunities. And the problem is like going online and trying to find them. Mostly like, LinkedIn searches, but like you can do GitHub and all that. It's usually like a very time-consuming process. You have to message like hundreds of people to get to one hire. And it's usually been like a pretty tedious process. And the way that we've been able to automate it is that there's a lot of technology, but there's also like humans, like human in the loop, training the data that really allows us to automate that process. And, it's been, so far, it's been really great. And, the company had evolved. So at some stage we had to be bootstrapped. At another stage, we actually raised now we're venture funded, and we actually had a pretty interesting false start with that, and now we're actually have raised more money, but it's been interesting through different businesses experiment what you earn from bootstrapping and what you earn from being venture backed.
And we'll definitely go deeper into that, because that's the point of this panel, to help people understand when you have to make those decisions, how you make them in your case. So it would be great. So let me start with some questions, and to facilitate a little bit of a discussion. So Emily, tell us how you funded your operations before you raised your seed round that was 4.5 million. What did you do before? Did you have to raise money, or did you just go ahead and raise seed round at the beginning?
I was very fortunate prior to starting Wellery, I came from the startup world. I worked at a tech startup, actually, not too dissimilar, I guess, to Andres in the HR tech recruitment world. And when I was leaving that company and saying I was going to start a company on my own, I had a few friends, peers, mentors, advisors, former bosses who all said, all right, well, can I put in? And I said, well, you don't even know what I'm doing. And they said, we don't really care, just take our money. I'm being facetious, but that was effectively the conversation. So I was very grateful, very fortunate to have a little bit of working capital to use. We're talking about, barely $100,000 angel money, but that got me off the ground. That was enough that I could buy a website, buy a domain. I put some of my own money in as well to, really start building. Things cost money, even the simplest things like having a website domain, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows. So that angel money really got me off the ground. It got me through, the first iterations of building and testing. And then I actually raised a 1.2 million pre-seed prior to that. So we've been through 2 rounds of venture funding, and that helped us get through our concept phase, ideation phase, and eventually to market.
And tell us a little bit about what did you have to demonstrate to the investors before they gave you money? And I bet they asked you to, have a male co-founder or a CTO or something like that. I noticed that you don't have that. So how did that go? What did you have to show them for them to give you the money?
Yes, I was pattern matched quite a lot. Most people say in order to be successful, the pattern matches that many investors believe in is that you have to have a male co-founder. I'm the norm. I am a first-time female solo founder, non-technical, building a technology company. And to me, I said, cool, watch me go. You either believe in that or you don't. I don't think that my gender has anything to do with my success. In any case, if it did, I would say it's going to make me a lot more successful. 80% of our customers are female. So it pays off to know what our customers want. And so it was hard. We got a lot of no's right off the bat. You asked, what did I have to prove? In the earliest days, it's a lot of proving that you're not going to quit. That's what I believe in. I think the earliest days was, look, I'm going to build this rain or shine, and you're either in it or you're not, and either get on board or again, watch me run, because you don't have the data just yet to really prove it. So much is showing your passion. So much is being able to identify the problem, showing how you have the solution to solve it. And the capital is just the means to get you there. So it was really about, I think showing passion, showing grit, showing determination, showing a problem that's real. I believe a lot in, are you building for an inconvenience, or are you building to solve a problem? We're building to solve a problem. The number 1 leading cause of death in the United States is poor diet. We're one of the first companies that's actually attacking poor diet instead of, focusing on a number on a scale, for example. So the first couple conversations were those 2 things, which is passion and problem solving. And then we got to our seed round. It was a lot more about, well, what's the solution? What's the product experience? Have you tested this? What have you learned from your tests? What are customers saying? Of course, when a seed round, we're still so early in our journey. And so much of what we were showing was still, an early MVP, but being able to share customer testimonials, being able to share early learnings on the revenue side, on the unit economic side, on supply and demand. Our business is a managed marketplace. So we have our customers, and then we also have our nutritionists and dietitians. And so what problems are we solving for on both of those sides of the business, and why was I the right person to solve that? So really being clear, concise, direct with those problem statements and how we were going to solve them. And I think so much of business building is also just, a demonstration of hustle and grit to find the right people to build with, and, determination to never give up. And so I think that was a lot of what my fundraising experience was like. And what I will tell everyone on this call, for the next female who's listening, is instead of pattern matching based on male and co-founders, I like to pattern match based on astrology sign. So I am a Pisces, and other Pisces founders include the founders of Spanx, the most successful female entrepreneur, Sarah Blakely, the founder of Instagram, Facebook, Dropbox, Dell, and Airbnb. So I think we're doing something right.
All right. All right. Thank you for that. All right, Will Glass, tell us, have you raised money actually already? And if you haven't, how have you been funding yourself so far in this venture?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have not raised any capital. We had the opportunity to take on $60,000 from an investor pretty early on when we were in idea stage, and we chose not to go that route for a number of reasons. Had to do with belief in kind of how this partner would add value, as well as terms, things that we weren't excited about. And frankly, we weren't certain where we were going to take it. And if we would have taken that capital, I'm pretty certain we would have built the wrong thing. So we are bootstrapped up to this point and have been living off of savings and using our own capital that my co-founder and I have saved through. He was in finance and then I was in sales and had a lot of success in sales. So we have bootstrapped up to this point. And we made that decision, one, from an equity perspective, and two, we wanted to kind of figure out what was going to be the best way for us to build the business that we want to build from a product perspective, culture perspective, and kind of prove out the concept and get as far along as we can before raising capital. So it is something that is on our roadmap. And we've, through various points in the company, have gone back and forth as to, well, should we raise now? Should we not raise now? And have managed to push forward. A really great technical advisor. So neither my co-founder and I are technical founders, but we are building a mobile app, a technical product. And so we've utilized a lot of the resources that are out there from a no code, low code perspective to get us to the point where we are today. So that's one of the great things is if you are planning on bootstrapping, building a technical product and you're not technical, there are solutions and tools that can allow you to prove out the concept. So that's the route that we've taken to date.
So yeah, give me a little detail on how long you've been bootstrapping and how many of you are in the company?
Yeah, so there are 3 of us in the company right now. And we have one person who's so we have an engineer. So we've recently brought on an engineer, and he right now is part-time and will be coming on full-time when we do get to the point where we are going to raise capital, which is probably in the next few months. So yeah, so we have done this since May of 2019. So I jumped ship first, started proving out the concept. And we built something that didn't work. We used a web builder and found out very quickly that people didn't respond to a web version and we needed to be native mobile notifications, things like that. So we have made plenty of mistakes along the way, but have been doing this since May of 2019, so almost 2 years now. And then my co-founder went full-time about 6 months after I did. So we kind of staggered when we made Ostrich our full-time job.
Well, talking about persistence, right? That's great, Will. All right, moving on. Will Moore, you bootstrapped for a very long time, from what I understand. And so tell us about how did you manage to bootstrap for that long? Was there profit involved? That you were able to run the company? And at what point did you decide? What was the impetus for you to finally decide to raise capital?
So in the beginning, I had read enough books that I was horrified to raise money. I'd heard the horror stories, and every sign was pointing to, if you think you can do it without having to raise outside money, you're going to want to do that. I don't know if that's, that was my attitude at the time and the perspective I took, as well as my partners. And so fortunately I'd done fairly well in real estate before that. I started this business right after, or kind of during the crash of the 2007, 2008 real estate stock market crash. And so I had a little bit of cash that I could run rate, I guess they call it. And we just decided, okay, we're going to use our own money and hopefully we'll be profitable by this date. We had goals and we said, this is where we want to be. And, year 2, sure enough, basically was coming up, which is when it's like make or break for a lot of companies. And we were going up, but not as much as we had hoped. And then it was like we got one big client, EA, who makes the video games, the video game maker. They make like EA Sports, like the Madden. Anybody that's a gamer here will know these Madden and golf and all these. They were in Orlando, which is where we were at the time, and they ordered like a $2,000 meal, and we're like, what? And it completely just, we ended up going in there and we talked to them and we said, hey, we could be your exclusive. They're like, yeah, we love that we can get any type of food from you guys. So we kind of developed a relationship with them, and that just helped to propel us to where we actually became profitable at around year 2. So we were actually starting to make some money. Well, I say make money. I mean, any extra money we had, we were pumping back into the business, but it allowed us to grow a little bit faster. And then, over the next 6 to 7 years from there, it was just slowly but steadily growing. And then we actually, one of our models to raise money was we sold franchises. And so we would get a one-time check from the franchisee as well as royalties as we went along. So we had our own corporate branches of doorstep delivery we owned them, and we would set up an owner operator in that area. So for instance, I was in Orlando. One of my partners was in Tallahassee. One of my partners was in Tampa. And if we wanted to start up a Jacksonville branch, we would actually get somebody that we felt, usually it was somebody that already worked for our company that was involved and we thought would be a good person, and essentially get them set up, and we would pay for everything and they would run it, and there would be like a profit sharing. And then with the franchisees, it was just straight, they came to us and said, hey, we like your concept. We want to start one in our area. And they would pay us. So that helped us to also raise a little bit of money. And then as we went on, we were doing better and better in our markets, and we did start actually becoming profitable until Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash. Sorry, that's my son. I apologize. COVID, baby. Living the dream. Does not seem to be a happy camper, poor little guy.
That's bust through the door.
Let me shut this real quick. Sorry about that. That's real life, people. That's real life. And so anyway, we got to the point where when these big competitors with billions of dollars came along and basically were like, we're going to just squash you guys like a bug. We're not going to buy you because we don't need to. We're just going to essentially give our service and our products away for free for an extended period of time until we choke you to death. I mean, this is obviously a bit extreme, but that's kind of how it went down. They just came into our markets and were giving away free deliveries. They were going to the restaurants and saying, hey, free for a year. And they were essentially just losing money to gain market share. But that's how, that's actually still how it's done in the industry. Once we saw that happening, we realized we really didn't have too much of a choice here. Like, we can't compete with $1 billion company that's intentionally losing money to put us out of business. So we decided to pivot, and I actually reached out to some of my contacts, and there happened to be this company that was equal size around the time. We were about 40 million in revenue. And there was a company out of Minneapolis called Bite Squad, BITE Squad, that was also about 40 million. And they had a few other branches too. And at this point we had 19 branches. They had maybe 4 or 5, mainly out of Minneapolis. And we merged. We basically combined forces. We raised money and we said, here's our plan. We want to pick up enough of these tier 2 and tier 3 markets, like the Orlandos, the Tampas, the Nashvilles of the world, not the New York Cities, the Chicagos, the LA, not those huge tier 1 markets, because those are already saturated with the big guys. But there was still room to run in the smaller markets. So we decided to just really expand quickly, which is what we did. And we started purchasing smaller companies. And we got big enough. We got to about a $300 million revenue that we finally got on the radar of one of these bigger players. And it was a company called Waiter out of Louisiana that ended up purchasing us in 2019.
Great. That was a great story. Andres, please let us know, like, you raised, your last round was 2 years ago for 5.4 million, if I remember. And so was that experience easier than the previous raise with Pixable? And have you invested any of your own money this time? And are you also currently profitable?
Yeah. Thanks for the questions. Yeah, so unlike Will, like I read the wrong books, because I thought that the only way of making a tech company happen was like raising VC money. So I didn't know the better of it, to be honest. Especially like the first time around when we were doing Pixable, I was like studying an MBA, and we had made like a deal like between me and my co-founder who was also doing an MBA. He's like, okay, and we can't raise $100,000 before we graduate. We can't do it, and we were able to raise like 30. So it was like kind of hard because you're like, oh man, like I already raised something, so you're kind of committed, but we really didn't have much capital. So, you know, like bootstrapping, like, and I get so many people asking me questions about like, how do you bootstrap? How do you account for all this time? And, you know, the reality when you're bootstrapping at the beginning is that it's really day to day, right? You're not really that worried about like, oh my God, how am I going to cover this 6-month, 6-figure hole? You're more like, hey, you know, like in our case, we had like little friends and family investments coming in, very unexpected. I remember we had an intern. We had raised like $50,000, and we had an intern. He's like, oh, I think I could raise money from this guy I know. I'm like, all right. Like I show him the deck. He goes through it. He does a really bad job. I'm like, you're fine. Like just go. And he comes back. He's like, I raised $180,000. We're like, what? You know. So it's just like all these unexpected, crazy stories that happen when you're like, especially at the beginning. You know, we didn't have that mentality. We were going to bootstrap. We were always very dependent on thinking about raising money. But it was, you know, like even when you're bootstrapping in with that mentality, like I think that don't worry so much about covering such a big hole. Just think a little bit about the short term, and that kind of helps you get through it a little bit easier. That's what I learned. And then when we raise money, you know, like probably when you raise money and when you don't have necessarily product market fit, is that you some extent get like this obligation to accelerate something that is not necessarily ready to be accelerated. And I think like when we were at Pixable, just because we thought it was the right thing, and then, you know, similar to Will, we started this like in the financial crisis. So there wasn't really much VC investment going on in 08, and then in 09, and then in 2010 it kind of exploded. And we were just like in the right place at the right time. So we raised some money, but we didn't really have necessarily the best product market fit. So we were just trying to do a lot of things. So I don't think necessarily like raising is always that helpful, but eventually it did help, like because we were able like to like try like a lot of different products, and something really stuck, and we were combining some ideas around doing web and mobile, and that led us to do something successful. But I do think that we were under this pressure of performing and growing when we weren't ready for that the first time around. And then when the company got successfully acquired, you know, I thought it was going to be much easier to get started. And I would say to some extent it is, but there's definitely like a lot of people, even the people who said no to us the first time and said the second time around, oh, like this time I'm definitely going to invest in you. You kind of go to them and you know, like a lot of them don't end up investing. So it's never easy. Like that's what I'll say about starting a second company, even the first time. And, you know, I definitely thought it was going to be easier, and it definitely wasn't. And this time around, I was able to get a little bit of a head start, but then we started doing something in consumer, like we were doing like a consumer product for a couple of years, and that was kind of not working that well. And then when we decided to pivot to what we're doing now, and I'm glad that Will already had the event with the kid running in, because I think that could happen at any second as well. But like when we were pivoting to the B2B, our investors said, look, like we're not going to double down, but we really believed in it, and we had to like bootstrap the company for a couple of years at this time, because you know, it came a point that even with that a successful exit, that people were like, oh, you know, this is not really looking that well. And you know, it was really hard changing the mentality, because we were really like, we just couldn't be dependent of that at some point, and we had to really change our discipline. We had to let go people, but then we were able to build like a lot of discipline, and we were able to build like a pretty decent business. And funny enough, like I wasn't even trying to raise money, because I tried a couple of times and they were like, no, this model doesn't scale. So I was like, you know, something like, I'm not even going to try. And then at some point we were doing a good enough job that we got investors kind of like trying to come in and preempt the round. And that was like what happened in a couple of years ago with Accomplice and Slow coming in, and they put in like $5 million. yeah, and you know, like actually, like what was really interesting is that I was like, oh, we're super ready for this capital. We've been doing it the right way. We bootstrapped and we were ready to grow. And you know, we went from a founder-led sales team. We just brought in like a very good-looking executive sales team, very top-heavy, expensive, and it didn't work out. And we burned like so much money, and we became very undisciplined very quickly. And then COVID hit, and the business was really threatened, and we had to go back to really like bootstrapping the hell out of the business. And so it's been, and I'll tell you this, like what's really challenging is that if you go from being like a venture dependent to bootstrapping, and then you have to readjust the team and reduce the size, it's very tricky. It is very tricky. So you know, lucky enough, and this has not been officially announced. It's going to be announced literally this week, but we have raised like a larger round, and it's something we're really excited about because, you know, during COVID in the last 6 months, we started seeing like a lot of growth, and we do feel that we're ready to raise capital. But you know, if I would have to like turn the clock back and think about this whole thing over, especially because we were doing like more like a consumer app at the beginning, it kind of made more sense for me to raise financing. But if I would have gone more to the B2B route, which is what I'm doing now, I could see a world where I would try to bootstrap as long as I can and try to sell to one business and create a little bit of a cushion, and that giving you some room to experiment. And you know, like, and then at some point you can really own your destiny a little bit better. Like when you're starting off the bat, like raising money from an investor, there's the expectations that you have to be $1 billion company for them. Like that's really what they need, because it's funny, like I've even worked with investors that at the beginning, they're like, you know, we're pre-seed, so we don't need this $1 billion exit. And then once they are like, after 2 or 3 years, they're like, no, we actually do need it. Like they see like this company that is $1 billion and it's like 100x, and they're like, oh yeah, that's the only thing that matters. Anything else doesn't matter. So, you know, like getting yourself in that route is exciting to some extent, but I think in other ways it's not for everyone. Like most businesses are not destined to be that way. So I think it's been a lot of good things and bad things both approaches for sure.
I'd like to take what you said, a really interesting thing, that this pressure that you feel once you get the money to accelerate, and you might be going in the wrong direction, but the investors want you to accelerate to get that 10x. So, you know, it's interesting. You said it, Emily. I was wondering if now that you got, I know how you started. You were really excited and passionate, and you speak really strongly about that. And you kind of position yourself. If you don't like it, you just leave it. But now that you got funding, is there pressure for you to accelerate a certain way and do certain things that you didn't have to do before, because now you have that investment and investors looking down, you know, breathing down your throat and say, neck, and saying, hey, you know, go faster? Or how you manage and how you know, balance that?
Yeah. The short answer for us is no. Everyone has their own experience. For us, we went into fundraising with a very clear plan with the use of funds and capital, and we're very open. I'm a very open communicator with all of my investors and our board. So there's no separate path. We're all on the same path together. I treat our board members, I treat all of our investors as part of the family and as part of the team, and we're all building towards the same goals. So, you know, we are on track to hit our goals this year. What we fundraised for is what we're using the capital for. So, you know, my experience has just been to maintain open and honest and transparent communication at all times. And then in my experience, there's been, you know, no disconnect in where we're going and why.
Interesting. Great for you. I'm glad. So, Will Glass, you mentioned something interesting that a lot of times people do. They use low code or no code environment. However, when you do that, you know, you're not really creating IP. So when investors are looking to invest, this has been my experience, they want something that they can claim IP, right? There's some IP that can claim that it's theirs once they invest or they own. So how do you, you know, balance that you don't have actual IP? You have the idea, you have a concept, but it's built on some other, you know, some other product's platform. What are you looking to for investors to give you give you money? What do you offer to them, like other than business concept and plan, right?
Yeah. So great question. Obviously, long term, you're reliant as if you use no code or a low code tool, you are reliant on that tool, which inherent is limiting what you can do. And then also, as you from an ownership perspective, having your own IP, you're not really able to protect it because someone could use those same tools to go build the exact same thing, right? So long term, it's moving and building your own native application. But by using low code or no code tools, you're able to de-risk the investment from an investor perspective because you can prove out the concept depending on what space you're in. Like it depends, right? Because we aren't connecting directly to financial accounts. So we're not, linking to bank accounts nor providing financial services. That lowers our regulatory burden. And we are able to build our application using some of these tools. So for us, sorry, I got an ambulance coming through, classic New York. So that is almost, at least at the stage that we're at, is just as important because we are doing something and applying it to finances, which inherently people tend to think very logically when it comes to money, yet we act very much emotionally and from our own beliefs and things like that. So we have the ability, with at least where we're positioned in the market, to prove out our concept, show that it works, and start to build a user base, and then easily switch from our low code tools and no code tools to our own native build. And that's what we're in the process of doing. So we have been able to at least prove out the challenge concept and the social concept. And so that, from an investor standpoint, means that we're not going to go build the wrong thing. So that's the value from an investor, is that, hey, we have already tested this. We've done some things that haven't worked. We now know what works, what people are responding. And now we just need to go natively build it. And then also add these other things that users are asking for that we can't currently provide because we have limitations with our current tools. So that's sort of the conversations that we've had with investors at this point, as we prepare to raise a round.
It's really interesting. Will Moore, and you mentioned something really interesting. You bootstrapped for a long time, but you also mentioned you were profitable year 2, which is very fast, right, by any standards. So when you calculate that profitability or account for profitability, were you counting, say, your founder's salaries into that, and then taking profit on after you because you might have been giving yourself a zero salary or dollar. So was that actual, including all the salaries, or were you just like working for sweat equity and then your profit was based on expenses you had to pay others or for services and those expenses? How did you, what was in your, income statement in terms of how did you declare profit? How did you know how did you present it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, now that we all know that I'm wearing red pajama pants, this answer will be a lot more impactful, I feel. So let me just gather my strength here. No, yes. The short answer is we were profitable, taking into meaning like that was after we paid ourselves. So we were actually, we weren't paying ourselves. My business partner in particular that I started with, Andrew Brown, he was my best friend. He worked with me at the real estate company I worked at beforehand. He didn't believe in the idea at first. And eventually I convinced him, I'm like, trust me, there's something here. He's like, I don't know, man. He's like, I don't think there's enough money in it. And I just was like, just come on, man, we can do it. So I ended up winning him over. And he was literally, he'll tell, if he was on right now, he likes to tell a story. He had a certain amount of money set aside. And at that 2-year level, he was literally down to like his last $2,000. And he did not know how he was going to continue his life after that. And that's when EA hit. And so, yeah, I mean, we were able to then fortunately pay ourselves, our staff, and be able to ramp up and grow. And marketing and advertising was an area that we really put a ton of money into at the time.
That's really impressive. So Andres, I wanted to ask you, you have someone on your team, your co-founder, Ms. Jurvetson, and we all know the name. So how did that help or did not help or put more expectations when you have someone like that on your team as a co-founder in terms of raising funds? Because you did say that you raise funds, that you had to bootstrap again, that now you are expecting a new round. So how did that relationship affect that path?
Well, like with Jen, like even though she has like a really impressive network, like I've known Genevieve from business school. We went to business school together, and then when she joined, she was already she got married with Steve Dervitson, who's a known investor while we were there, and I do think that it definitely like opens. It really helps facilitate a lot of introductions, but I do think that in some extent like it's not necessarily logical for even a very famous and a VC to invest in their wife's company. So that's not something that you would expect. But I think that like it is easy to get more introductions. But the reality is that it's still a competitive market. Like this time around, like Jen is not really involved so much in Fetcher in the day-to-day. So like she really had not much to do with this fundraising. And like you can get the intros. Like I think that's something that is doable. It's never easy. Everything is a pain in the butt. But like getting your foot in the door is just a small step in the battle. And especially in these days that you're raising money in Zoom, that for me, probably for anybody, it was a first. It's different, like now you're pitching like much more people, so the rejection rate even goes higher up. So like I think that there's definitely, and I thought the same thing, to be honest. Like I was like, oh my god, like having somebody like Jen is just like we're gonna be able to talk to everybody. But at the end of the day, like they're in the business of saying no, right? Even to people who are great and people that can open a lot of doors. But I would not take like I think like the time that you save by getting in front of people is reasonable and already an advantage. So it is an advantage.
Yeah, great, thank you, Emily. So so I had a panel before this one, or two before this one, where we talked about diversity in VC. And given you already had some experience, and given that the shortage of women in the venture capital, I was just curious if you started thinking about how your experience could help other female founders, but you being on the other side, meaning you would be an investor. So have you thought of that, and how, or have you contributed to any female founders forums or organizations to help them in any way, with your experiences?
Sure. I have two thoughts on this. I think one part of the problem is that we keep talking about gender, and I think the best professionals should just be the best ones at the job, and it shouldn't actually matter if we're whatever gender we all identify with. So I think part of the problem is the constant communication about it, and instead of a look at the work or the output. So that's definitely something that I am passionate about. I think we're doing a better job of that, but have a lot of work to do to take the fixation off of who the people are, as opposed to the work we're actually doing. With that being said, yes, I am a female. Yes, I am a female founder, and yes, I am a part of a lot of female-founded organizations. As we know, less than 3% of venture capital dollars goes to female founders. So anything I can do to help support that, I stand by. And if I do my job right, I can inspire potentially any women and or men on this call to go out and try to solve a really big problem that can make the world just a little bit better. So yes, I am a part of organizations. Yes, I believe in the more we can inspire by doing, hopefully the next generation will feel just as welcome to go through the experience of raising money and building a company. But if I had to be honest with you, my hope is that this conversation wouldn't be addressed with the next generation of founders, and it really just be a bigger focus on the amazing work that they're doing and the type of impact they'll make in the world.
I hope so too. I have two teenage girls, and I hope by the time they're ready to do something like that, this won't be as big conversation as it is now. But certainly statistics are really it's difficult to look at statistics and there's definitely something that needs to change. So now talking about inspiration, I'd like to ask everyone, each panelist to, maybe say something, maybe the most personal experience they had in this process of raising money, and what advice would you give to entrepreneurs? So maybe Will Glass, I can start with you, and maybe just give us one thing that most personal experience, something you learned that you want other people to know. So maybe that would be helpful to them in their money raising cycle.
Yeah. So I think finding the right partner is the key. And again, we haven't raised. We did have the opportunity to raise money. We had someone that offered to invest in us, put $60,000 into the business when we were still an idea, and they weren't a really good partner. And we made the decision to walk away from that money because we just didn't see how they added value beyond capital. And at least at the stage that we were, especially at the idea stage, and this was even before we'd actually technically founded the company. So this was in January of 2019. We founded the company in May, and we walked away from that. And it really had to do with not the character, but just the relationship that we would have had with that individual. And so we have focused on that now, and we've had conversations. And literally today, I got off the phone with a potential investor who gets it, right? They understand the value. They understood who we were as founders, and so that's been really, really, really impactful. So that's what I would say is really think about what beyond the money, what the investor can add in terms of value. But again, I would probably lean on some of the rest of the panelists to get beyond that, because I'm sure there's a lot more to think about as you go through that raising process.
Emily, did you want to add to? I mean, you had a great advice already, but did you want to add anything? Maybe the most personal experience that you want to share, and maybe that could help someone.
Sure. Fundraising is hard. I think it's hard for everyone and anyone who goes through it. You are putting yourself out there, you're putting your reputation out there, you're putting your ideas out there, you're putting your work out there. And I think, Andres, you said it really well when you said they're in the game of saying no. So you have to be prepared for rejection. We definitely got a lot of that. So, my advice to anyone going to raise is, I would say a few things. One is decide before you go to raise if you are a venture-backed business. Some businesses aren't, and that's okay. They can still be extremely successful. But decide, which path you're taking and know why. And then before you go talk to an investor, figure out in your gut, like as deep as it gets, if you really believe in yourself and in the problem you're solving, and if your solution is at least some semblance of right, it will take a lot of turns and iterations, and will probably end up so different than what you thought it was. But the core of how you're thinking about solving the problem is that, do you think that's right? And so if you are so confident in the problem, the opportunity, the solution, and your ability to solve that, know going into fundraising that no matter how many no's you get, that won't waver how you feel about what you're doing. And I think that's really important. And so it just takes time, but then you end up finding the right investors who become a part of your team and become a part of your family and believe in you and see the world in the same way that you see the world. And so, I would really just make sure you do the deep thinking before you get to the fundraise process. And then the second part of that is, I would say also you have to do the work. I spent 9-10 months on no salary. I quit my job. I lived off savings. Yes, we raised a little bit of angel money, but the only thing that touched that money was R&D. And effectively for 9 months, sat in a dark corner with my head down in a computer and talking to as many people who would talk to me to figure out what I was doing and why. And so once I got to even the early investor conversations, I had the answers to the questions because I had done the work. And something, Will Moore, I think you touched on this, in order to do the work, you have to be fiscally responsible. You can't just jump ship and start a company and raise money in 24 hours. That's just not realistic. It takes time and effort and work, and you have to figure out a way to live while you're figuring out all those questions. So no, nothing happens overnight. Believe in yourself, and plan ahead would be my all-encompassing advice to anybody.
Thank you, Emily. Great. Will Moore, so you had great success with bootstrapping, great success with raising money. Is there a formula? When do you do one? When do you stop bootstrapping, and when's a good time? Have you figured this out? And what could you give advice on that, or maybe some other thing that maybe we didn't cover? Maybe the most personal thing for you in this whole fundraising process.
So, I would definitely say there is no formula. I feel like that's part of the problem. Like I said, like I read a book, and then the direction I was headed in was opposite of Andres. And, and he went that way, I went this way. We both made it work in our own way. The formula isn't about whether you raise, don't raise, when, how. It's about you as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, and kind of some of the things people have already touched on this panel, which is just having that just insane like dedication, persistence, commitment to being like, okay, I believe in this idea, and I call it this desire. I don't call it, I'm stealing this from, I think it was Napoleon Hill, a desire backed by faith is what he calls it, which is essentially, it's like, it's in your, like, just at your core that this is a really good idea. And because you are going to fail miserably, you're going to hit a zillion roadblocks, you're going to get slapped around, you're going to get robbed, you're going to get, you name it, it's going to happen to you. And if you don't have that resilience, if you don't have that belief at your core that this is going to work, and that ability to push through, be persistent, that's when you win the game, right? Because 99% of people are going to give up. But if you can stick through those times and you believe it, eventually the law of compounding, if you start making the right moves and you start doing the right things, and you've got a system and a structure and you're headed in the right way, something's going to happen. And it may pivot completely from your original idea, but it's you, and it's about you, and it's about your ability to push through those tough times. I would say that's the formula.
It's kind of like be stubborn in your conviction or vision, but be flexible on like execution details, and be
right. And like Glass hit a point that there's this book called Getting Real. And there's another one, I'm drawing a blank on the name right now, but it talks about, I think there's a lot to be said for just going in and breaking things, doing them, like not spending too much time building something out and making it perfect and thinking what people want. Just get out there and put it in front of people. Like he learned that his web part didn't work, right? And so he's like, okay, right? Maybe instead of that, he'd raised $10 million and they spent 8 of that million developing out the web part. And then they didn't realize until a year later that it didn't work, and they wasted all that time and all that money. There's a lot to be said for doing it cheap, doing it fast, just seeing what works, what doesn't, getting feedback from people, pivoting, and then going from there. And I think Glass even said at the beginning of this, like he's glad he didn't raise money. Maybe it wasn't him, but in the beginning, or it would have been a waste. I think he did say, right? Because it's like, right, if somebody handed me $1 million check right when I started Doorstep, I can guarantee you that money would have been burned in all the wrong ways. But it's like, as you start to then find your rhythm and you get into it and you start to build your momentum with what it is you're doing, and you've got the stuff in place, you're like, okay, this is it. This is how we're doing it. And then if you need money at that stage, I would recommend, but that's my take on it.
Thank you so much. And Andres, would you give us a last kind of advice that you could offer to people trying to bootstrap or raise?
Yeah, I think it really depends also at the stage where you are. But like if you're just really just getting started, what I would say is that there's like if you're considering raising money and you really don't have any structure or feel pretty out of it, like I think that there's like a lot of incubators and accelerators that can really help you get in front of a lot of people and form your pitch a little bit and just accelerate your learning curve, I would say in general. And I think that that's I think that that's something that can be really helpful. I think that even when you're just getting started, there has to seem that you're in some sort of a little bit of an inflection point. Like you just want to show that there's something happening right now that is going to help you really. That like the moment of something happening is now, and it doesn't necessarily at the beginning has to be related with revenue. So it could be that you were signing up 10 people a day and suddenly last week you signed up 100 and you're like, whoa, like something exciting is happening. But like in my case, now that you're a little bit more advanced, what I would say is that fundraising, it should be like if you're really serious about fundraising, it should be like an ongoing process in which you're kind of like collecting these relationships with people, especially now with Zoom. It's much worse than before. It becomes even more cashless. So you kind of like collect these relationships with people. You keep updating them. Wait till you kind of have this kind of like really accelerated moment that looks very exciting, and then that's when you kind of like try to do everything like very well paced. And I'll tell you, like I'm the first one who's failed in that one for sure. Like I try to say, oh, I'm gonna do my first set of meetings in the first 2 weeks, and then my second set of meetings the third week, and you try to do it like that, so you kind of like build a process around it, and that creates a little bit of this FOMO, because the reality is around investors is that the hardest part is to get that lead. It's to get that first person to say, okay, I'm ready to give you a term sheet. And as soon as you go back and say, oh, I have a term sheet, like once you stop meeting, everybody is really interested and everybody wants to come in. So the momentum really changes. So it's really about like trying to get that first yes. And the best way to do it is really to treat it as a very important process that is not an on and off switch. It really is constant. Like the way that I'm thinking about our next round, even though we just raised, it's like, look, like there was people I spoke to that they kind of liked it and they thought it was early and stuff like that. So now what I'm going to do is really, now what I'm going to do is really just start sending updates. And when things seem to be good, I'm going to say, hey, we're going to start fundraising. Do you want to have this conversation? So you already know, even before you start fundraising, like if the people that you're talking to are interested or not. And I think that that's like the ideal scenario that I haven't done well, to be honest, but I think that that's like how you should approach this in general.
Well, thank you. I think we came to a close. I don't see questions from the audience. Let's see if there's any. Oh, there's one. So question is, so I'm going to read from question from Bill Howell. I'm curious, everyone's first attempt at an MVP, how much did it cost, accounting for time, as if you were paying the team rather than just sweat equity? And did the market like the MVP? How much did the MVP cost? So that's the question. If anyone wants to volunteer for this.
So that minimal viable product, right? So kind of like what I was saying, to me, that should be your number one goal from day one, to do it as quickly as possible. I actually didn't know all this back then, and we didn't necessarily do it that way. And I could have probably saved a lot of time, money, energy. Now that I understand that strategy now with my new business, which is more of what you introduced at the beginning, what I'm trying to do, I'm kind of figuring all out as I go. And right, and I understand that the biggest thing is you just got to get it out there, and then you see what works, what doesn't, and then you pivot, and you essentially reset goals and go from there, versus getting that analysis paralysis and over spending too much time figuring out what you think people want. But at the end of the day, they may completely surprise you, and they may focus on one little part of your business that you didn't even think was anything, right?
I think it's Reid Hoffman, maybe, who says the quote, maybe someone else, and I'm totally screwing that up, but it's, if you're not embarrassed by the first product that you put out, you're waiting too long. And I think that is so important. I think the first MVP doesn't need to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, spent on an engineer, especially if you're building now. There are so many off-the-shelf solutions that you can cobble together to prove out the problem statement and, figure out how people respond to it. And then you can bring that MVP to an investor and say, here's what we've learned. Now we're going to raise to actually build this correctly, or to actually build the real technology or the real IP. But I think, from my experience from MVP is, it can cost a couple $100 when all subscriptions, are pieced together. And you should be building as fast as possible, getting as much feedback as fast as possible. We build with high impact, low effort. So how can you get the highest impact out of the lowest effort of build, and the best answers as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I want to second what Emily just said there in terms of high impact. So our technical advisor has been leading engineering teams, and he essentially says that the question that he asked his team is, how can we not build this? So what is the way that we can not build this? Because it's expensive to build things. So like for us to date, in terms of, and this doesn't account for like sweat equity and the amount of time that we've spent in the business, but we've spent less than $6,000 to get to where we are. Right. So we've done that through just hacking stuff together, paying for things when we needed to plug things in. Like we have a referral program that we have in our application that's live now, but it would have taken so much time to build that. So we did buy that. So it's figuring out what you should buy, what you shouldn't buy. But even to test the concept, we use Facebook groups. Like we got our users into a test Facebook group and proved out the concept that social challenges worked. Then we went to a web version. It didn't work. We built it, spent 3 months building it, a little too long, and no one migrated over. It just did not work. And then went back to the drawing board, and we were about to go spend probably somewhere between $30,000 to $50,000 is most of the quotes that we got from an outsourced development perspective. So if you're looking for quotes, I found that pretty much no matter what requirements you give someone from an outsourced, it falls in that range. Don't know why, don't know what the reasoning is there, but was at least our experience. It didn't matter if the team was based in the US or India or just name any other continent. So at least to a cost perspective, that's what I can add value there.
There's another question from Tyler Lawrence. This is what milestone did you hit, or do you wish you had hit with your MVPs that let you know your product market fit was good enough to go out and raise more?
I would say that well, you want to see some sort of enthusiasm of some extent in anything that you're doing, and a little bit that something is getting pulled out of you and not getting pushed. Like the problem when you're doing MVPs is that you're not necessarily delivering the full experience that you want to do. So sometimes you just want to lower your goal. So let's say that you want to open like I don't know, like you want to deliver like something that's like a completely full product, but you can't do that yet. So what if you kind of like simulate the first part and do the second part and just do one thing, and that kind of allows you to take shortcuts and see like, like something that I usually do when I think about MVPs is like, I try to say, think about like who's like your most ideal client, like somebody that you can even imagine. All right, now go to that person and make it like super concierge level easy for them to use it. Like just do everything for them and just deliver something and see if they're very excited about it. And if that person is not frankly excited about it, then, I think that you're really validating very closely what you thought. And I think that a lot of people, it happens to me too. I get very excited about building products. Like building products is the funnest thing. But like, what sucks is putting a product out there that nobody really is going to use. And So like what and it's really hard to get out of your comfort zone when you don't have a product yet and kind of like sell it. But like that's really, I think, how you can really validate the MVP at a very low cost. And you should try to just put a little bit goals beforehand. So say something like, oh, I'm gonna have 10 people use it, and 2 of them are actually gonna pay for it at the end. Something like that. And if you don't even get to that, it's okay. You can still maybe continue, but at least you set a goal. Like that's a little bit how I think about that initially.
Right. I think with that, we don't have any more questions. So we're past 7 o'clock. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, all the attendees. Thanks for great questions. This has been great. I hope that inspires other people to raise money, and you know, and in a way, they can learn something from you. So thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.